What makes high quality software?
So for me, it is making sure that the users are happy so that they want to keep using your product. It's when the development teams are happy so that they don't burn out, they're not working with too much technical debt. And as a result, very, very important for me, as a result, the business is happy because it gets money.
Hi Katka, welcome to Software Engineering Tales. I'm really glad that you could make it
Hi,
today.
thank you for having me.
I know that your game, if I can call it like that, is QA basically. So, uh, how would you explain what exactly is your role?
Yeah, that's a very good question because from my experience, when a company needs a QA, they don't particularly know what it means. So they think it means just discovering bugs because those are the symptoms, right, of when quality goes wrong. But QA
Yeah,
goes much beyond that. So how I usually explain it is QA's job is to help the company integrate quality and adopt the mindset of quality. So this spans the whole project or even the company. It's a cultural change. We are basically coaches or architects that we establish strategies, even new processes around quality to help the companies deliver consistently with quality. So it can span the area of user experience. So I often collaborate with UX, with designers. It's also, of course, touches engineering. So that involves tests, but not only. It could be code quality, it could be infrastructures, pipelines. So, for instance, if I see that the CI/CD pipelines take too long, it's of course the developer experience is slower. So, part of my job is to make sure that the developers face as few struggles as possible. And then, of course, processes and everything around quality. So, establishing testing, establishing single sources of truth, documentation. So it's not just one thing, it's a lot of different things, or at least that's the way I understand it.
yeah, that's really cool because I often feel like when you say QA, it means just testers, and if better, then maybe sometimes some automated testing. But I think that a lot of like developers
Mm.
are looking at QA through the fingers a little bit because I think they don't appreciate the role as much as they should. And I saw on your LinkedIn that you went through quite a lot of like different roles in your like 10 years career or something like that, right? So and what was interesting for me was that you also went through the role of like QA architect.
Yeah.
What's the responsibility of like QA
So
architect?
this is a role that it wasn't officially given to me, but I was basically on a project which started as open source, and I joined the project to help them because their tests were failing. They didn't really have a vision, personas defined. So I helped to basically help them establish the whole quality process and strategy. So as the way I view QA architect is mainly technical, but not only. And it helps set up all processes, including static analysis, including documentation, including tests, including coding style. Yeah, so basically it's owning the solution of quality, mainly technical, but not, as I said, not only uh,
Yeah,
teaching people how to think about quality, how to through reviews mainly. So, like I did more reviewing than implementing myself, where I would guide them how to write better code, how to think about it, and of course learning back because not all the technologies that they use that I knew from the get go. So that's how I sort of understand. It's like a solution lead for quality, if I can call it that. And yeah, going through all the various roles helped me understand the different perspectives and different responsibilities of each role and what they bring to the table. So, what I think is the discourse between development and QA is partially caused by a lack of communication. So, in basic corporate company, you have a silo, you have the testing team, and then you have the development team. They barely talk to each other. The only ways they really communicate is, hey, I found a bug. Okay, but it works on my machine. And yeah, it's not a natural atmosphere where they just talk to each other. So how I usually approach this is learn to talk to those people regularly. Ask them about their daily struggles, and then they learn to like complain to you about what bothers them. And then if you help them and show them where your value lays beyond testing, then they learn to appreciate you for all those other things. Because similarly to a company that doesn't have any established quality, they don't really know what it means. So they kind of have an understanding, okay, so this person does testing. So it's kind of proving yourself and showing what you can do, which can be really hard if you're a junior QA role, because the company doesn't really know what you need. It doesn't give you much agency. It just tells you, well, we expect you to find bugs. But it's kind of a role of QA to kind of help educate people around it and show what they're missing.
Do you think that there is a huge difference when you are supposed to be QA in like a small startup and in like a huge corporate, machine?
Off the top of my head, the corporate is harder because they've already established some processes and they have usually a strict hierarchy in place. So if they're not willing to listen to your voice of quality, then it's really hard to make any changes. And if there are changes, they usually take a long time. Well, at startup, it is more chaotic, but you have usually much more room to realize yourself. So you can sort of step in and take on different responsibilities, while the corporate already like gives you boundaries, try to put you in a box from my perspective. So yeah, corporate is harder, and also the technical challenges are much bigger because it's about scaling it up. It's about much more complex solutions, often guided by some regulations as well.
Let's get to the beginning, and I'm really curious how you got into like QA and software engineering in general. How did it all started?
Well, at school I always loved math, but I also knew that math wouldn't get me a well-paid job. So IT was starting to be a thing. So I took my first C programming course at high school, and then I continued at the university, and already there I tried to be more engaged. So I got some internships here and there, and that's where I started as a software engineer. Unfortunately, it was a corporate company, so they saw me basically as a number, if I may say that. So it was really difficult for me to stay in that position and really appreciate it, because I didn't feel like I had room to grow. I tried even there, like I found out for the first time that QA was a thing in that company, and I said, hey, can I switch to this role because I'm much more interested in that? Well, they didn't give me that opportunity, unfortunately, which kind of slowed down the process of me to get there. But then I basically kind of got a bit demotivated by the whole thing, by the corporate culture. So I switched to project management. I still wanted to stay in IT because it was an intriguing industry for me. But project management was too detached from the actual solution I found. So I was trying to help the team succeed, but I didn't really know what daily challenges they faced. I didn't understand the solution, internal solution. And so I sort of pivoted back to technical, or mainly technical, but QA. So it's still a support role, but it like touches all the other roles. And that's really where I think I shine, because my approach is very much thinking before doing. I'm quite risk averse and careful. So I feel like the value I can bring is, it fulfills me as well, and it's the natural way of being for me. So this is kind of how I got there. And through all the experiences of software engineering and project management, I tried agile coaching as a scrum master. I sort of learned also to appreciate the challenges that each of the roles face, and I'm able to communicate more in their own language.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because like I see around me quite often people who try to start as a QA because they think that it's easier to get into the industry as a QA, and then work their way up to like development, and not vice versa. So So yeah, that's really something that sounds interesting, and I really like to see that, because I didn't think that you could have so diverse and so long-term career as a QA, and now you are opening my eyes a little bit. So yeah,
Great.
that's really cool.
As for the, sorry, if I may
Yeah,
just follow up
sorry.
on what you were saying, the gateway to IT being QA or testing, I would agree that a tester is a good entry-level job into IT. So if there is a product that requires manual testing, it's essentially from the user perspective. So you don't really need to know all the technologies, right? Usually it's hosted somewhere, the solution, or they just give you a device and you get to just go through it. You get to experiment. And through communicating with the other roles, you slowly learn how software development works. You learn about all the other roles. So you can switch to engineering, of course. You can also switch to UX design if you find that the more creative part at the beginning is what you really want to do. So I feel like because testing is essentially experimenting as a user, it's much more accessible to people without IT background. So I would agree with that. But I wouldn't say that QA in itself is just a subset that or something to be switched from to engineering.
Do you think we will still have need for like manual testing in a few years?
Yes, definitely. The reason for that is that even though I'm supposing that you're referring to AI here, we still need
Yeah.
to tell any machine, robot, AI what to do. We need to define those requirements. And the only way to exhaustively test everything would be to somehow formally define all the states that the application can reach. And for that, you would need to document like huge books and books because software is complex. All the things that come together. That's why you have all the layers like unit tests that look at the like low level units of code and then the end-to-end test. So there definitely will be a need for quality because, well, there needs to be someone who defines what quality even means. There needs to be someone who assesses those risks, and even with when the AI looks at the internet or gains some sort of value comprehension about this, you still need people to also think creatively. So until AI learns to be creative enough to actually look left and right, not just follow a script, not just follow some sort of a given path, it will not be able to replace us. Like when we're testing a basic flow, we notice, hey, we're not testing this primarily, but this button looks weird, right? This when I did this, something weird happened. And depending on how elaborate any machine becomes, so like if you just do test automation, you write it in code, it doesn't look anywhere. It just tunnel visions on that one path. So that's not good enough because we still need that. We need to use testing as a way of asking us questions like, is this good enough? Is this good behavior? So until we get to a point where it can ask those questions, we will not be replaced by it.
Yeah.
What do you think?
So basically, like exploratory testing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think you're right. Maybe we will just need fewer people to do that, and I don't think that it's really good approach because I know that there are companies where everything is kind of manually tested, and they don't invest in like test automation and stuff like that, and they just use testers to regression test everything again and again and again because it sounds cheaper. And yeah,
it's cheaper until it's not, until you scale up enough so that there's way too much to test every day. And that's what machines are good at. They can give you consistent results because they do everything over and over again, never gets tired, gives you consistent results. So regression testing of the critical paths, that's the most important part about that. You can't regression test everything. So of the important things, again, decided by humans, can be absolutely automated and should be. I agree with that.
Yeah. I work on a project that is quite complex because it's like it's software that basically runs intersections in the city and makes adjustments. So it's very complex, and we use a lot of automation in our testing, and we have really, really robust like unit tests, layers, and a lot of like functional tests and so on. But still, the best testing that uncovers a lot of like weird edge cases and weird mistakes is when we just run it on a street.
Yeah, because it won't be used just the ways you expect it to be used.
Right. Yeah, basically because there is so many parameters and so many unknown, that when we basically run either some simulations or like we run it in the real world, we uncover so many mistakes that we didn't anticipate to see. And I think this kind of exploratory testing is really, really very valuable and will be there for a long time.
Definitely.
But yeah.
So test automation is not a silver bullet. I would sum it up like that.
Yes. Yeah. So let's get back to AI. Do you did something change in last year or two in your work? Do you use any like AI tooling or something like that?
I don't use it. So I tried it at the beginning like a year or two ago. But I quickly found that it just agrees with you no matter what you say. So even if you like to it tries to please you. And so I find it very dangerous to just lock myself in this echo chamber with this thing that wants to get your proof or like or whatever, which is the way of training it. And similarly, I also found myself, well, okay, so if I just ask AI whenever, won't the threshold for me actually trying to work out a solution lower so much more before I actually ask for help? I should be able to still learn how to solve problems on my own. I should still be able to work things out. And I shouldn't delegate my thinking. I should delegate the manual work, like in a washing machine, there's sort of AI to determine how long it needs to take. That's great. Or adjust the timing based on how much clothes you put in there. But software development and testing and everything around it is a very creative process. And as such, it needs to have people with expertise doing it. So if you just put a person who hasn't used this framework before, then the danger is the AI is going to suggest something that's not good enough, but they won't know. And so I would say be very careful about it. I personally am not using it because I like problem solving, right? So I want to solve it on my own. When I do use it, and I have found myself using it in the past, is, for instance, in pipelines. So it was Azure pipelines, I believe. So I wasn't very good at writing PowerShell scripts, stuff like that. I couldn't find it in the documentation, so I tried it as an add-on to search engine, basically. So that's where I think it can help. It can be an easier way to searching for things. It can also be a good way of summarizing information from a meeting or from a huge essay. But I would definitely not using for development. What's your experience with AI?
Pretty similar. No. So the thing is that I can't really like use it for development in my daily job because basically the company restricts it, and they are just not there yet, and they are worried about privacy, and there is a lot of like privacy concerns, and I
understand.
And that's it basically. So I can't use some tooling like Copilot or something like that. But I played with that in some like tiny projects. I think it's useful, but I never had opportunity to use it for like real work and some larger code base. So but I think it's important to check it again from time to time and stay in the loop, because it might happen that in a year or two, the level of the tooling will be so much better that you don't want to miss, on this opportunity, and you want to stay in the loop.
Definitely. If it is trained on good quality materials like books and educational material, then it could be very good. But I'm worried that if they just let it loose on the internet and the code quality that is out there, it's gonna only recommend mediocre solution. So depending on the source.
but but I think there is a lot of like new approaches and discussion around like how to put it into some uh, how to put in some safeguards and how to check that it's not hallucinating and so on. So I think if you look back at the progress in the past year and 2 years, if the pace stays the same, I think we can be very, very surprised what it will be capable of in a year or two. But let's see.
Definitely.
We are people who are able to adapt as we go and improvise, so we will be okay, I guess.
Yeah.
Cool. You mentioned quality in software. What does quality in software mean to you?
You mean the technical solution now? Or
I mean quality.
Quality
in general. So, what makes high quality software?
That's a very good question. It can be different things, and it depends on what the product is supposed to do. Because if we're talking about medical devices, then the risks, the stakes are just so high that you need to test a lot more than you would in a, I don't know, commercial website, right? So defining quality is one of the first things that QA needs to do when joining a company, because if you just cover something with tests, if you go through some flows that are not important or even used, or if you have bad assumptions about how the product is to be used or what are the needs of the users, then you might be just covering the wrong things. So for me, it is making sure that the users are happy so that they want to keep using your product. It's when the development teams are happy so that they don't burn out, they're not working with too much technical debt. And as a result, very, very important for me, as a result, the business is happy because it gets money. Usually, though, the corporate gets it the other way around, or even startups may. So they think that they're aiming for profit and they forget about the users, they forget about the developer experience, the daily experience of the teams, about the processes. And that's where the problem comes, because as a QA, you can try to explain it to them, but at the end, they are the owners of the company, they are the top management. So if they don't listen to this new perspective into their life, then there's very little you can do. I mean, you can it really limits the value you bring to the table. So that's why I highlighted also at the beginning, you need a company that's willing not to just give you a job where they define what they think you should do, but that they are happy to accept new perspectives and give you the room to help them adopt a new mindset essentially. So it's a lot of things, depends on the project. That would be my short answer.
How easy or hard is it to like open these discussions, or how hard or easy was it for you in your previous companies?
It's one of the main challenges, and it's one of the reasons I left my previous companies. Because as a company owner or as top management, you need to be sort of a shark, because you need to, at the beginning, take the risk. Start a new company is very risky. You are putting your own capital, your own properties at risk, right? You're putting everything on the line. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to. Usually they want to hear, let's move forward, what is the easy, quick solution to go forward. So they're looking to
low-hanging fruit.
low-hanging fruit.
Low-hanging fruit.
That's I've heard that so many times. So instead of fixing the root causes, they have a bunch of people that they see doing things, but they're not necessarily going in the wrong direction, right? So they see everyone putting fires, like firemen. You know the value of a fireman by how many fires they can put out. However, you don't see the value of smoke detectors or how many fires they necessarily prevent. So it's really hard to quantify the value of prevention and what didn't happen to someone who wants to see results, who wants to see things moving on. So usually the way I used to describe it is, just because we're moving somewhere doesn't mean we're moving forward. We could be moving in a zigzag way. We might be moving even backward. So just because we're doing something, if it's without purpose, it's just for the sake of doing, we might be doing more harm than good. So the only way to go forward and to go fast is to do it right, because even though you're moving slower than the person going in a zigzag, you might arrive and often do, arrive at the destination much faster. So yeah, this is very hard conversation to have. Not everyone is receptive to it. And unfortunately, if the company isn't receptive, at the end of the day, once you've learned everything you can, once you've helped the way you can, it's time to move on, because the company likes the idea of quality, but they're not ready to implement things around it and invest into it.
Yeah, I've heard about one project that the client was like really huge, well-known company, and basically they were not happy to pay for any unit tests. So basically they said, don't spend any time with unit testing. It's okay.
It's okay, is
And
it?
yeah, weird stuff out there. Yeah. My question would be, because as you said, it depends what you are building, the quality of the software, right?
Mhm.
And if you are like fresh, startup, you have some few thousand, users, you will probably move very fast, and you will not spend a lot of time with like testing and like unit testing and stuff like that, because the the issues and bugs in production don't matter that much at that point. Where do you think is the key moment where you should really sit down and start thinking about the quality and about like mitigating all this debt that you might have introduced already into your product?
Very good question. So I would say, no matter if your ultimate goal isn't to just try things out, but is to have a stable product, you still should at least the minimum amount of work to establish some sort of coding style, because the technical debt just piles up immensely. So what I just use some recommended linter rules that you find online. It's as easy as like use extend, like a one-liner, extend this, like just add one preset there. When it comes to testing specifically, I would still say that unit tests really help us, because while we're developing something, we're making assumptions about the code and what it does. So even unless it is like a prototype to be thrown away, but if we're actually trying to put something to market, then unit testing still is valuable. And sometimes I found, unfortunately, that since business doesn't see that and then might say, hey, don't even write unit tests, the best approach is not to be as transparent. It's part of development. That's all they need to know. The outcome is that it works. And what we need to get there, the how, is up to engineering, not up to business. Business cares about the what and why. So where are we going, what we're trying to do, and then it's up to engineering to determine the how. If we're working on a fast-paced project, it's still worth to cover the critical paths, because unless you work on your own, then someone else needs to understand your code and what it does and what your assumptions about it are. And it's so much easier to do and then check whenever you make a change that you didn't break something using unit tests. Unit tests are usually very cheap. So I don't think that there's any excuse big enough to just say, let's not even write unit tests, or a bare minimum of integration tests. But when it comes to end-to-end tests, that's a different story, because unless you have a final idea about a feature, developing an infrastructure around end-to-end can be very expensive, and that's probably what most people imagine behind just testing. So I would say that it's okay to test manually, to just have, I don't know, product owner go through it before releasing a new version, or even not, depending if it goes into production or is used by someone. But I don't think it's worth maintaining end-to-end testing infrastructure, including all the seeding of the data or testing data scripts or stuff around it, because it's not just the tests at that point. So I don't think that's worth automating unless you're very serious about the business, unless you have some risks in place that would make you, I don't know, get into legal trouble, that would put someone at risk of losing their data or something like that. So the low level, the static analysis, the unit test, I feel like they are a must-have, but the more to the upper levels you go, the more expensive it gets, and there we can talk about the return of investment.
Yeah, that's really cool. you talked about like, you know, cooperation between like developers and QA. What would be your advice towards developers and towards QA to, you know, improve this cooperation?
Yeah.
How should they do that? How should they start?
So even though currently I'm on a team that's technically, my main team is a testing team, or SDET they call it, Software Development Engineering Test, I still am a part of the ceremonies or meetings of the product teams. And the reason for that is they know I exist, they talk to me semi-regularly, so they get to know me. So it's like building a rapport. So if you talk to them, it's not like just some stranger you talk to twice a year, but they have some sort of knowledge or experience of me being valuable, and they are more likely to come up to me and talk to me. The other thing I found is when you start in a company, don't just ask your team or get to know your team, get to know all the different roles, what they do, have at least 1 or 2 people in each department that you got to know, and you ask them what they do, because one, they feel appreciated, someone is interested in what they do, and then they're more likely to help you and consider you when they're doing something. So that's one part of it. And then on a more regular basis, the main place where development and, well, testing comes together is code reviews. So it's very important to be graceful during code reviews, I found, because code reviews, they are the main way of learning, gaining external feedback from people. I've often seen companies underutilize code reviews and then just blindly approve, especially test code. You know, it doesn't break anything in production, let's just ship it, right? But code reviews are a very important part because they're the last check before you merge the code and make it everyone else's problem. You can learn about new ways of solving problems. You can, by reading someone else's code, by having a dialogue over their code. So I find it very important to be engaged in those code reviews, and not just code reviews, but also reviewing the test code, reviewing the functionality overall, asking about the requirements. For me, reviews are not just about code, but, you know, but the whole thing. So during those code reviews, or, well, peer reviews, I found it very important to use correct language. So instead of do X, or you forgot to do X, just say, well, I believe this should be like that. So talk about the code, don't talk about the person. So being able to give feedback without making the other person feel bad, I think really helps to build a culture where you're not afraid to admit your own mistake. You don't feel like you're being accused of something. You know that both sides are here to give it their best and to learn along the way. So to help especially development and QA come together, it would be by acknowledging their value, by treating them with respect, and by communicating in a graceful manner.
Yeah, I think there are also like some frameworks for code reviews. Mm-hmm. I don't use it personally, but I've heard it multiple times that, you know, there are like standardized sentences, or there is a standard for how you write you know, different stuff into code review, and that helps to not be personal, because I remember one of my first code reviews when I was really junior, and it was a colleague that I well known. Mm-hmm. We knew each other really well because we sit next to each other, and he meant it a little bit like a joke, but he wrote me to the code review something like, is this a joke? My eyes are bleeding and stuff like that. And it was not very funny at the moment, because you can imagine I was very insecure, very junior, and yeah. So
it can make or break a person and a real professional relationship. Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah,
and that's maybe where AI could help to rephrase it so that it doesn't come out as that.
Yeah, maybe. Possibly. And also I think a huge part. I was just thinking about, you know, how the feature comes together, and that associated Jira, and I think a huge use of AI in the future might be if you have like really large complex projects, to gather the information together.
Yes, documentation.
Because there is so many places where you have information. A lot of is in like Jira tickets. A lot of is somewhere on Confluence. Probably something is in the documentation, and I think these are areas that will make AI very, very useful.
Like a knowledge base.
Yeah, basically, but the clever one,
Yeah.
You want to, because it's really hard when you are like right now. If I dive into some feature that we need to improve or change, and it was done like 3 or 4 years ago, it's sometimes hard to understand all the decisions and why they were made that way.
Yeah.
Because documentation explains how it's working, but then there is something a little bit quirky, and you can't really just recognize it from the code and from the old commits and stuff like that. And then, in our case, usually it's the old Jira ticket that has all the information. But sometimes, not every team is that good in documenting stuff. And sometimes I know that teams use a lot of like Slack or Teams channels, and a lot of stuff just gets forgotten deep in the chat history, and that's not good.
I would like to follow up specifically on saying that the why gets lost. So usually when I join a team, one of the first practices that I try to apply is establishing user stories. Now, user story is a format for usually describing new features, but it could be for any type of ticket. So like as a persona, so it could be as a user, as an engineer, contributor to the project. I need something so that something else. So I need what I need and then why. So when you then go on the investigation of why does this feature exist, it's of course about the discipline of linking all the resources together, but it's also about having the why there. And I found both in tasks for developing features and even in test definitions that they're missing the why. It's like, we need to know the value of this feature or of this test to determine how important it is to fix it, right? So yeah, definitely agree. Having a why, especially important.
Yeah. One thing that really helps is to, at least in like Jira ecosystem, I think it's really, really nice that you can just use your ticket number to link everything. So we'll have like standardized, commit messages where we put always the ticket number in the commit message, so that then, you can see all the commits and everything linked to Jira, and it just works well together.
Yeah, definitely. Even tests, you can link those to when they fail, which Jira ticket that's tied to.
Yeah, really important, because I know that especially a lot of like younger colleagues, they didn't like this like overhead, and I always try to explain them that it's important, but they don't like to write down stuff, to document stuff. They just want to jump straight into the code, make it work, maybe write some unit tests, and that's it. And then you open the ticket 2 years later and it's empty. But yeah.
It goes about, also speaks about the code quality though. If you only write code to work, not to be maintained, you're setting yourself up for a lot of trouble in the future. And that's what I found, especially when writing tests. People don't realize that test code is supposed to have different standards than, and not necessarily lower standards, than production code. So in production code, you need to account for all the states, you need it to be reusable, but tests are essentially linear flows, right? So you only execute certain things in one test in a certain order, and that's it. So if you're only focusing on writing it in a dry, don't repeat yourself way, then it might make your code a bit shorter, but it adds complexity. It adds artificial branching. So if you have a branching in your code, it means, okay, so there are different use cases for this. But in a test, it only obscures what the test does. So, because during each test execution, only one branch is taken, so the other one is a dead code. So by thinking about what you're doing as you're doing it, and by thinking about, okay, so if someone comes to this piece of code, will they be able to understand it? Similarly to, will they be able to understand the feature documentation? Really important. People don't often think about long-term, you're right.
Definitely. One question that I ask every guest on this podcast. Tell me about one time that you really messed up.
Yeah.
And what you learned from that.
Yeah, so when I was an agile coach, one of my tasks was to introduce Scrum in a company. And I was always all in for transparency. And what I didn't realize was, but it was essentially, I should have asked, was my mistake. They reported retrospective the whole board of what went well, what we could improve to their boss, to the company owner. And so I tried to tell them, okay, so this is a safe space. I encouraged them to add stuff to the retrospective board, which got someone into trouble. And so I learned that it very much depends on the context. While there are ideals of how we should approach things and that we need to build trust, especially in a new environment, I need to know what the dynamic is, if it's a bit toxic, if it's like, if there's someone really in control, before I start applying these in general good practices, but that might not be as appropriate in that context. So yeah, that opened my eyes a little bit to be more careful about what I say, because usually I'm quite a blunt and straightforward person, and yeah, need to learn a bit of diplomacy there.
We all do. Yeah. Guilty as charged. Yeah. Okay. So it was a really great chat, and
Likewise.
I hope that you will make it back on the Software Engineering Tales at some point in the future. But before we say goodbye, what should be the take-home message for everyone? If they should just take and apply one thing from this, 40 minutes, what it should be?
Quality is a mindset. It's not a one-size-fits-all for everyone. It's very subjective. So when you are trying to integrate quality into your company, think long and hard about what quality even means to you, because it means different things in different contexts. And also consider how much investment you want to put into it, because quality isn't cheap, but it's definitely worth it in the long term, because your product's going to make it and be successful.